Welcome to Community Matters. I'm joined by Ben Rudolf. He's a partner at Rudolf Smith in Worcester. He lived in Shrewsbury for over 10 years with his spouse and two children, originally from the Midwest, and lived in Massachusetts the last 10 years. I'm glad
20
you're
years
here.
ago. Yeah,
20 years, 20
20
years.
years. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you're here, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very glad to be here, Jonjy. Thank you for having me.
Now, I know you because you actually were a partner of a very old friend of mine who went on to become a judge. And who knows, maybe that is in your future as well, because you are a very well known and actually quite a well regarded attorney in our area of Worcester, Massachusetts. I think one of the nice things about you, I know that you do a lot of work in labor law, and I thought that we could just kind of talk a little bit about your inspiration and what drives you in the field of law and as a person.
Well, I started working, and you said labor law. A lot of people say that. It's actually, lawyers will draw a distinction between labor and employment.
Huh?
Labor typically refers to the union context and dealing with union organizing and collective bargaining rights and union grievances. Whereas employment law covers just about everybody else, people who are not in a union, which is about 90% of American workers. And I mostly concentrate on the employment law area. I started doing that in earnest about 10 years ago, and I love it. What I love about doing employment law and mostly representing employees is that I am exposed to so many different types of jobs, fields, and professional competencies. And I have learned so much from my clients and my cases over the years. I get a really fascinating insight into the economy. And I do represent some small employers as well. And I really take great pride in doing that and learning from them as well. So that really makes me look forward to every day working here at the firm. And my family inspires me to get up in the morning as well. I got a lot to do, and I like doing it.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, just they wake you up, go to work, come on. But that's really great. I know that it can be hard, especially in a tough economy where you've got the tension of employers that want to extract as much as they can out of their workforce, and then you've got employees who get kicked out for frivolous reasons. I know one person in particular I'm thinking about who had an issue with having a disability. And I remember we actually a long time ago we had an employment lawyer on the show, and she was talking about how unless you work in a public job, it's very, very challenging to get justice in Massachusetts for employment law. And this person I was thinking about had a disability and had a very similar situation where it just railroaded right out of the company, and there was almost nothing they could do because of at will employment and other things. But is it really that hard for the average person to get a fair shake?
Yeah, well, I don't want to give any specific legal advice.
Oh,
Nothing
yeah.
I say on the show should be interpreted as legal advice, but I can certainly say that the at will doctrine, which is the law in 49 states, not Montana for interesting historical reasons, but it's certainly the law in Massachusetts, is a very sweeping doctrine that gives employers a tremendous amount of discretion to hire and fire and demote, promote, transfer employees. And it can be very difficult for an employee to bring a wrongful termination claim because of that broad discretion that employers have. Of course, employees also have the freedom to leave at any time. And that's what a lot of the defenders of the doctrine cite as a policy reason, that there should be freedom of contract and freedom of movement. But the reality in present day America is that employers tend to have a tremendous amount of leverage over employees, especially because in this country we have a very unique system where healthcare is quite often tied to employment, which is not the case in almost any other country in the world. There are certainly many countries where some private plans are part of the employment, but Almost every other country in the world has a public healthcare system that provides health insurance to people regardless of employment. And one of the harsh consequences of the at-will doctrine and the market mentality that we have here is that people very often lose their health insurance when they lose their job. And especially if you have a disability, that can be devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it wasn't specific to her case, but there was, the topic I was trying to aim at was the fact that there's a new movement called patient advocacy, and I think I'd mentioned to you at some point, but I've started a kind of a charity around this. But patient advocacy kind of drives at the difficulty that people face when they have some kind of a sickness, which we all have in life. But the real problem with being a patient is having to figure out how you're going to pay for your illness while not being able to functionally work at your job. So, since you can't work there anymore, you get kicked out of your job, you lose your health insurance, you can't get treated to go back to your job. A crazy catch 22 situation. And I think there's a large movement now to try to push forward the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the accommodations that are supposed to be there. A lot of people just aren't aware of, or maybe they don't know how to ask. So if you're a patient and you are down out of luck, you got cancer or something like that, is there like some general information about what should you do with your employer? Should you just tell them what disease you have, or should you just say, hey, you know what, I just need some time off, and here's a schedule, and it's just part of an accommodation. That's all I need to say.
Well, one thing that has developed in the last 5 years, which is extremely important, is that in Massachusetts, we have the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, which applies in most employment situations, not all, but most employment situations. And that entitles employees to paid leave. It's not fully paid, it's only partially paid, but it is paid. And it's a right that employees have, and the legal framework to enforce and protect those rights is very robust. And it's a good thing to do if you anticipate you're going to need to take leave to exercise your rights. And typically, you file an application for paid leave through the state. The state has a Department of Family and Medical Leave, and you submit an application for leave. So your employer does not control that process. You and your doctor do. It really, really is important to be in touch with your doctor and to make sure your doctor understands the need for them to sign whatever forms may need to be signed, whether it's applying for leave or applying for an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You say the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's a very well-known statute. That is a federal statute that applies, but in Massachusetts, we have a state statute that is very similar, that gives very similar rights to employees who are in need of an accommodation. And if you do need an accommodation, whether it's a change in your job or some time off, it's very important that you have your doctor complete the required form and submit that to your employer. It might be your supervisor, it might be the HR department, but you need to make sure that the decision makers, the people with the ability to agree to the accommodation you need, get that information, because the law imposes an obligation on employers and employees to communicate with each other about disability accommodations. And if the employee is not providing the relevant information, then the employer is kind of off the hook in terms of having to offer the accommodation.
That's very fascinating. It really, I do feel very badly for some of these people. I'm sure you must have come across people, and I found some really heartbreaking stories of people losing their jobs, their health insurance, just out of no fault of their own. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the loss of a job can be totally devastating. You lose your health insurance in many cases, you lose your sense of purpose in many cases, and of course, you just lose the material means to put food on the table and pay the rent. Um, Unemployment is supposed to be there to provide the backstop for people. It just like paid family medical leave, it's only partial payment, so it doesn't replace your income. And it can be extremely difficult for people to come back from the loss of a job, especially if they have a disability or if they are pregnant or about to have a child or have just had a child, or if they're elderly. We have lots of people who are in their 60s and 70s who still need to work. And when they lose a job, it's that much harder for them to find a new one.
It's I don't know. Sometimes I look at these people, I'm like, I don't know. That's a really tough situation. So the craziest thing actually happened some time ago. This is the exact opposite, but it kind of shows you how power plays. So there was a guy who he was the head of an organization, a nonprofit, and he allegedly committed like a sexual offense against someone. They complained, and then they put him. The board of the nonprofit put him on leave, and said, probation, and said, you'd be paid, but you got to go through some training, and we'll be in touch, but you can't come back here so long as we have to protect everybody. So they put him on leave. Another complaint comes in, and for the same from a completely different person, but the
Yeah.
same type of complaint. So
Yeah.
they're like, okay, we're gonna terminate this guy.
Yeah.
But it was written in the bylaws because this guy was the head of the nonprofit. It was written in the bylaws that if you want to terminate him, you have to go and get a membership wide vote, and just you can only recommend that he be terminated, but you can't. The board can't
Right.
terminate him without. So the membership was basically all his friends, and
Right.
so they told him as part of his stipulation he can't contact anybody. But what were they going to do? So he contacted everybody,
Yeah.
and they all came in a membership wide vote, and as a petition to hold the vote and everything, they put in the thing. They said we're going to restore him and fire the board, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy. I was looking at that and I was like, so compared to somebody who's the head of the organization who can like very easily, sometimes they bounce back. They're like Teflon. But then you've got people who get fired for the most frivolous reasons, who have no say, and really you're their only recourse. Am I right?
Yeah, and I will say too that sometimes the remedies that the legal system offers are not necessarily what people are looking for. I do get a lot of people contacting me saying I was fired by this, terrible person who sexually harassed me, or is a racist, or is otherwise just a, very abusive boss. And
Hmm.
I want my goal is to have that person fired. And that's not the relief you're going to get from the legal system. In most cases, if you get relief, you're going to get money. You're going to get a payment by the company, and the person that caused the job loss or the horrible experience, oftentimes, maybe they get fired, maybe they don't. That's really up to the employer, and their specific circumstances. Maybe they have a contract or something like that. But that's oftentimes the motivation that people have in coming to me. I want justice, and what they naturally perceive to be justice is I want that person fired. But that's not usually something that's going to be the end result of a legal case.
I can imagine. Yeah. So people have asked you, can you get them fired for me? That
Yeah, it
that's not
comes up
what
a
you do.
lot, and it makes sense. How come I got fired? That's the guy who sexually harassed me. Those types of injustices happen a lot.
Yeah. Oh, that's so crazy. Yeah, it's a tough situation, but I know I can kind of understand why you feel like, you feel very happy going to work because you do get to help people and you do get these kind of wild situations, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I at the end of the day, I really do want to try to help people, and sometimes that's just giving advice and consultation, and I don't file a lawsuit a lot of the times. And other times it's more of a 5, even 6 or 7 year commitment.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So I know that this is your practice. When you founded this, we talked at length about this many times, but when you founded this, I know that you were very inspired. And what is it like, now in our area being a small business owner and, making it in this climate in Western Mass?
Well, it's always challenging running a small business. Every small business owner will tell you that there are constant changes in the marketplace, and of course the changes to the internet and search traffic and AI. have presented a lot of challenges. I am in a sector that is extremely old-fashioned and out of date in many ways. Um, some sectors are cutting edge. If you're in biotech, you're constantly doing the latest thing. In law, we're still serving, as you know, as a constable, we're still serving people with summonses that have the raised seal, which is what people were doing 1,000 years ago, literally 1,000 years ago, to start a lawsuit. So some things we're still stuck in the Stone Ages. um, we now have Wi-Fi in all the federal courthouses in Massachusetts as of last October.
Wow.
That's the first time that's happened. We've have e-filing in the state court. We've had that now for, I think, 6 or 7 years, but only pretty recently.
Wow.
So my sector is one that is very slow to adapt. And I think there's some bad reasons for that. I think a lot of lawyers are technophobes or just not very well educated about technology and don't keep up with some of the changing um, landscapes. On the other hand, I think there are good reasons for that. I think people want confidence and certainty about what to expect with our judicial system and our laws, and those should not be changing too quickly. People want predictability. People want to know what's illegal and what's not legal. So there are good reasons for the law to change somewhat slowly.
Right, absolutely. I definitely agree with you on the small business point. It is a challenge, but I think you're right. It's nice to see the court system is coming into the internet era, and that the dot-com boom of the legal system, I have to say, is it's not surprising.
AI is going to force the legal system to change faster, though, I will say. And the
Really?
pandemic did as well. The
Oh,
pandemic finally forced attorneys and judges to realize that we need to be more tolerant of Zoom hearings and meetings and depositions and electronic signatures. So now it's very standard for agreements to be signed electronically, and affidavits and court submissions can be signed electronically, and depositions and hearings are oftentimes held on Zoom. So you have people who are in California and they don't need to travel anymore. One of the upsides of the pandemic is that forced the legal system to adapt. I think AI is going to force people to adapt too. You see a lot of, especially, self-represented people in court using AI. And there are serious ethical questions that need to be considered about lawyers and judges using AI. Is it appropriate at all? If so, what are the limitations that we should impose on it? There have been lawyers who've been disciplined for using AI, and AI will hallucinate and generate fake case law. And lawyers, if they're not careful and they haven't read the product that the AI is putting out there, they cite to this fake case law and they can get into serious trouble. And rightly so.
right.
So that's something that we have to deal with right now. It's not going away, and it's happening very fast.
Wow. Yeah, it's I never quite thought of it that way, and I haven't yet seen an AI attorney in the court, but that definitely would lead to some very interesting comedy questions as to, how you would go consult with your client, and then how the AI would get up there on this, in front of the judge, be like, I object. I mean, you see, these are all the reasons.
One thing I think people need to be really careful about is it's very common now for somebody to have a situation that they want legal advice about, and either they don't know a lawyer or they just haven't been able to speak to a lawyer, and they go online and they ask ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whoever for an answer to the legal question they have. And that communication with the chatbot is not protected attorney-client communication the way it would be if you talk to a lawyer. If you call me up and have a consultation with me, that's entirely privileged. I can't disclose any of that. In even a court can't order me to disclose it, or won't in most circumstances. But anything that you submit to a chatbot online is potentially something the other side can learn about. They can get a copy of that and they could find out what you're thinking. So people need to be very careful about that.
Yeah. Oh, I never thought about that actually.
Yeah.
That's right. When you go to court, right, they seize all the information that your computer and they go through everything.
It's certainly something the other side could ask for if you have a civil case or a divorce case, for example, or even if you have a criminal case, the state could probably get a copy of online searches you've made, and you think you're looking for legal advice, but you're actually putting potentially sensitive information out there.
Wow. Now, and a lot of people use AI for the document generation. I know, what used to be the domain of attorneys, where you would go and you would get your, let's say, if you're an employer, right, and you want to make all your human resource policies or something like that, or you want to make, and now it's very easy to generate that on a large scale. Now, of course, it's the cheapest, most efficient thing. But if you are now, of course, you have it from the other side of it. Do you think that for people who have employees, do you suggest that, those AI generated template documents are good enough, or maybe you don't use them?
I don't think it's a good idea to rely on AI. I think using AI is something that more and more people do, and I understand that that's just the way of the world. And sometimes maybe that makes a lot of sense to use AI to create initial drafts of documents, to identify issues. But if you're an employer and you're preparing HR documents, it's a really good idea to get advice from a lawyer. One thing that AI is not very good at is understanding the specific jurisdiction that you're in. So if you go online, the internet is global. And even if you're giving all of your information to the chatbot may not understand that there's state-specific law that applies. For example, if you are an employee working in Massachusetts, Massachusetts law probably applies to your employment, even if your employer is based in California. I see national and global firms make mistakes because they fail to account for the system of federalism that we have in the United States, and the fact that state law is oftentimes going to determine what rights and responsibilities employees have and employers have. And so that subtlety is very often missed by chatbots, just like it's missed by attorneys practicing in other states who aren't being careful.
Yeah, I am quite amazed at where the future is taking us. And I don't know if you've seen some of those movies where the robots take over. I think I forgot the name of it, the one with Will Smith, but there's a whole bunch of movies like that. But I really feel like sometimes we are going to have an issue where we're going to be dealing with a larger scale of everything, right? When you're dealing with employers, you're going to have that much more data. And when you're fighting cases, you're going to have, you'll be fighting with computers plus people. Uh, did you ever imagine yourself being in this situation where computing technology would just completely revolutionize everything?
Well, I'm old enough that the internet was new when I was in high school, and I didn't get my first email address until I was in college. I didn't get my first cell phone until after college. So I've seen a lot of change in my lifetime, and I guess I have I don't know that I've foreseen the future, but I definitely saw that the development of the internet and software, even before AI, predictive software, would change the way people interact with the court system. And I think some serious systemic change is probably needed um, in order to adapt, because it is true that the economy is changing so rapidly. The systems we have in place to protect people's rights and to enforce their responsibilities, they need to bend and they need to adapt.
I know that you also represent employers, and if I'm not mistaken, you do some other legal areas as well. Is that right? Or just employment law?
I personally concentrate mostly on employment. I have handled some other types of cases as well in the past. My firm handles a variety of cases, including criminal cases and family, divorce, and custody cases. We have 10 lawyers, so not all of us do what I do, Few of us do. But I do enjoy employment law, and it keeps me very busy. There's a very high demand for employment lawyers.
Right, absolutely. Now, from the employer perspective, I'm sure that that must be a completely different animal altogether, maybe more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I tell employers is it's important to make sure that you're complying with applicable laws, make sure that you understand that, make sure that you have good legal advice. Ideally, somebody you can go to on a regular basis in order to practice preventive legal strategies rather than getting sued all the time and having to hire a lawyer to represent you. Um, but even more important than legal compliance is treating your employees well. And employees who are happy are not going to sue you, even if maybe there is a legal issue. It's the employees who are unhappy who decide to bring lawsuits. So there are so many ways to improve the way you treat employees. And when you're saying goodbye to employees, I think it's important as an employer to handle that in a process that is um, minimally antagonistic, even if no one's going to be happy to be losing their job. You can handle it in a way that is less likely to lead to litigation.
I appreciate that actually. You focus on the relationship and keep it in a preserving way. And sometimes you don't have to worry that even if they could take you to court, maybe they won't. That's
I have a lot of concerns about AI, but my best hope for AI is that it will allow us humans to focus on more human things and treating
Yeah,
each
I
other
hope
as.
so. Well, Ben, we're almost out of time, but I want to give you the last word. And also for people who might want to reach out to you if they think that they have a case or they feel like they have some advice they'd like to follow up after this show, where do they reach you?
Well, the firm's full name is Rudolf Smith, Griffiths and Ruggieri, but that's kind of a mouthful, so we go by Rudolf Smith. I have to emphasize that the Rudolph is spelled with an F. People have trouble with that. But if you Google us, you can pretty easily find us, and you can email me at rudolph@rudolphsmith.com. Our website has a chat function, and we have, of course, phone numbers and can pretty easily be reached.
That's beautiful. Well, you know where to reach Ben. He's a wonderful person. I've known him for a long time, and I can personally say that he is a great man and a wonderful person to talk to. And if nothing else, when you're in a bind, give him a call. He's just he will help you. So Ben, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and it's been great having you here.
Likewise, Jonjy, thank you so much. It's really nice to see you, and always a pleasure.